I finished the Junk Parts Junior. Last time that you saw this guitar, I had just finished up doing the shellac finish on it, which worked out almost as well as I had hoped. Now, I've completed assembly and it feels really nice. I got a couple of weird things happening with the control panel here, so let me show you the wiring and then I'll show you some sound demos. So I'm not going to do a full step-by-step guide on how I did all of the wiring for this. I'm not the best. I'm still working at improving my capabilities with the soldering and the wiring. But let me tell you everything that I did and everything that this control harness is going to do. And first of all, I got my schematic out of the book Solid Sound by Eric Daw. This thing has been awesome. It is all about single coil wiring. I really love this because, as you can see from the cover, and as you can see from these drawings here, it is really inspired by and in the style of the old like 60s and 70s shop manuals and like popular mechanics books and all that sort of stuff. And I love the aesthetic. It's got a ton of great information in it. And I'm going to honor the author's wishes and not share the schematic that I used, but I am going to tell you about it. I'm going to read a little bit of the description of it so that you can have an idea of what we're starting with, and then I'm going to tell you all of the modifications that I did to it. So this is one of the S-wire schematics. It is on page 24. It's called the Kill Switch S-wire schematic. The description in the book says, "This is an S-wire style schematic that makes a lot of sense to me. Here we have two on positions, one with and one without a tone control, and the third position cuts the signal completely. By presetting the tone where you want it, you can have a slightly mellower sound when in the middle position, and the third position is basically a kill switch." This was drawn up by request of a friend of the author. So the three-way blade switch with a single pickup still gives you some options. You can have a kill switch in the upper position. In the middle position, everything works normally. The volume and tone are all in the circuit. At the bottom position, it takes the tone control completely out of the circuit. So not only is it turned up full, the load of the tone control is completely taken out, which is going to brighten up your sound even more than having the tone turned up fully. It also gives you, as mentioned in the book, the ability to do presetting on your tone control and switch back and forth between using it and not. So in addition to this schematic, I made a few modifications of my own. All right, so here's my control plate. You can see that I've also added a push-push switch. I don't really like push-pull switches, so I prefer a push-push, so it's push-on, push-off. First thing to note here, I was going to use a Fender-style three-way blade switch. I do prefer that style. However, the body of this guitar is so thin that I needed to use the import switch to be able to fit everything into the cavity. Here we have the setting where the tone control is bypassed. In this setting, everything else works. Everything is on the circuit. And then in this position, everything gets sent to ground, so you've got a kill switch. You've got a regular volume control. You've got a regular tone control. The first mod here is that as opposed to putting the switch first and then volume tone, I like to switch the control plate around. I'll put the switch way back here, and I'll put the volume control right here as close to the bridge as possible. I like being able to reach for this quicker and not running the risk of knocking this with my hand, especially when it's got a kill switch. It's a little less of a problem when it would just switch you from like a middle position to a bridge position, because when you're playing, it is what it is. In a live situation, you might not even notice as much, or you can give yourself some time to fix it. If you completely cut your signal with a kill switch on accident because you're strumming too hard and this was right next to the bridge, that's going to be noticeable. So I switched the control plate around. I set it up so you've got basically first order access. This is the most used thing. This is the next most used thing. This is the least used thing. So that's how close they are to the bridge. Now the next mod is this little ground strip here. I've been following a guy on Instagram for a while. Goes by the handle AmpTech74. And if you are on Insta and you don't follow him, you need to. If you do anything with guitars, anything with effects, anything with amps, he's a really experienced tech, and he does a lot of repair work, and he really talks step by step through everything that he does to repair the things that comes through his shop. And one of the things that I've learned from following him is that whenever he does a guitar wiring harness, he bulletproofs it in this way. He adds a heavy 12 gauge bus wire as a ground strip. And by doing this, now you've got this heavy wire soldered to the cases of all the potentiometers. And you know how over time, these nuts will come loose on your pots, and then they'll start turning in the control cavity. And you get the loose feeling, you don't get the same control over it, and then that eventually breaks your wires and your connections inside if you don't fix it in time. This right here is going to give a hard connection that's going to prevent these from ever turning. So even if this nut comes loose, this soldered 12 gauge wire here is not only acting as a ground, but it's also going to anchor everything in place so that it never twists or breaks on. Really awesome concept. I've used it on every guitar I've made since I learned that. Next thing, I've got tone control here. I've got a .047 cap in it. I've installed the treble bleed. This is my first time using a treble bleed modification, and so we'll see how it goes and we'll see how I like it. For those unfamiliar, it's basically taking a very small value resistor and capacitor, putting them in parallel, and bridging your input and output on your volume control with those two pieces. Now that's going to act as a little bit of a high pass filter and let just a little bit of treble signal through, no matter what your volume control is set to, which means that as you turn down your volume control, you aren't going to lose as much high end. And it's not going to become dull or muddy as you turn down the volume control. You're going to keep the clarity in the top end throughout. I've seen it, I've heard it with a lot of guitars, and I've liked where I've seen it. This is the first time that I've tried it, so we'll see how it goes. The last modification is related to this push-push switch. The schematic was originally for a single coil pickup. I've got a humbucker here. I split the humbucker from a 2-conductor into a 3-conductor humbucker. And so this here, I've just got one of the lugs here going straight to ground, so that when I put the center tap of that humbucker into this piece here, when I push this, it's going to send one of the coils of the humbucker to ground, splitting the coil and giving me the single coil sound. So now I have kill switch, volume end tone, volume with a bypassed tone, and the ability to split the humbucker. Not to mention the bulletproof casing, not to mention the treble bleed. That wraps up everything that I'm doing for the control harness. Now I just need to get it installed and get it wired to the humbucker and the output jack, so let's get that underway. Can I just say, this is the part of the build where I get really nervous about whether I've screwed up everything or not. Because up to this point, I tested the pickup, I know that the pickup works, I know that the alignment is good with the strings, all this. I've tested all these connections, and theoretically all of the connections are good and therefore everything's going to work. But I'm always nervous that I'm going to plug the thing in and have no noise and have no idea how to fix it. But I suppose it's just one step at a time and we'll get it figured out. Also, helps if I turn my soldering iron on, doesn't it? Here. These will be too short to find good. Ooh, that's a close fit. Very tight fit. Okay, this guitar is theoretically complete. Let's plug it in and see what it does. Gotta say, I'm pretty pleased with this thing so far. I did make a couple of tiny mistakes, which don't really affect the playability, maybe mess a little bit with the tone versus what I could possibly achieve. I'm gonna make just one more video about this guitar talking about the lessons that I learned from it and the couple of mistakes that I made, so that hopefully if you undertake a project like this, they're just things you can bear in mind so you don't repeat the same mistake, or maybe just not as many times as I'm repeating the mistake before learning the lesson. As it turns out, it really is all about getting the practice in and doing the work until you improve. For now, I'm going to continue playing this thing because it feels great and it sounds good and it's lots of fun, and I'll see you in the next video.